So in this tutorial we're gonna make this satisfying animation using Blender. This is a animation that it will be supported by both Eevee and Cycles, whichever you prefer. So let's get started. So right now we have our default cube that we are going to reduce in size just like this, and we are going to apply the scale of it because that's a standard procedure we should follow. And we're gonna go into edit mode and bevel the edges. Select all the edges with your shift key and rotate and select all the corner edges and make sure they're all selected and go into bevel. So pull this little drag utility and open up your bevel tool and increase the segment just about enough so that we can see that the edges are like has some oval to it. We are going to apply a subdivision modifier later on, so we don't need to be that detailed for now. So let's go into our modifier tab and let's add a bevel modifier so that the top and bottom of our disk is beveled. So hold shift and just give enough of beveling on both the top and bottom so that it starts to look like this. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is add a subdivision modifier. As soon as we apply the subdivision modifier, we can see that it starts to look a lot better. So make sure you have both your viewport and renderer set to the same subdivision preview so that you can see what you are actually gonna be rendering. Also right click on your object and select shade smooth. So after that we are going to add a array modifier. So as soon as we add the array modifier, we're gonna see a copy of the our object right next to it, but we don't want that. We want in Z, like it's stacked on top of each other. So put a value of 1 in Z and increase the count. As you can see, if you increase the count, it will increase the number of object instances in the scene. So I would go with something like 7 or 5 and increase the size of the object so that on a smaller screen it looks more satisfying and not that distracting. So I will select the object cube, our original cube, and increase the height a little so that it looks more a bit more satisfying. So let's do one thing. Let's delete our light and camera. We're gonna add them later again. So for now this looks just about right. And up next what we're gonna do is add an empty sphere. So add an empty sphere, make sure to scale it all the way around the object, at least the top part of it. It doesn't really matter, but make sure you do it right, because we are going to use this sphere to control our offset for the array on the z-axis so that it can rotate. We are going to rotate this sphere in our animation. So here's what you do. Rename the sphere into rotator, and we have our cube. So click on the cube and go into object offset and select the rotator sphere, the empty sphere that we created. And as you can see, it's not doing what we want, so hold it and pull it down. Yes, as you move it down, you can see that the offset is stacked on top of each other correctly. So now if we increase the Z value, you can see it's doing the desired effect that we're looking for. Now expand the animation window from the bottom a little and select the rotator object and create a small key. On the rotator object, you can press S or A Depends on which blender configuration are you using. As soon as you have a small key right here, using the I'm going to use the auto key and goes to say frame 200 and increase it to say 90. Now if we move back and forth, we can see it goes from 0 to 90 on the z-axis on the rotator, and it rotates the object. So let's set our frame to 200 as well, and set our frame end to 200 and check everything. So since this will be a posted on social media such as Instagram, we use a 1080 by 1080 square format. All that will be much more clear as we add the camera. So let's move on to our shading window, and once we are on the shading window, we can see let's rename our material to say plate material, which is gonna be this material. Let's select something bright. We're going to add a small bit of subsurface scattering so that the edges of the object is a bit more visible and it looks a bit nicer. I want you to play around with the materials here and see which one works best for you. But for me, I usually go with bright colors and bright opposing colors. So let's increase it to slightly metallic and reduce roughness. That will gonna increase the reflection on this. And specular is the amount of reflection you're gonna get, like specular highlights and stuff. So I'm gonna use something between orange and red to differentiate the object from the background. So now let's add a background. So for that, all we need is to use a plane. Make sure your auto keying is off on the animation, otherwise everything is gonna start animating it. So place your plane right on the bottom so that it doesn't intersect but it just about touches, and make it much bigger like this. Yeah, looks about right. And then what we're gonna do is make it even bigger and give it another material. So we're gonna call this plane material. Okay, now let's give it something like a purple reflecting color, opposing color, so that the the object separates well from the background. So as soon as we increase the, let's say, reflections on this, reduce the roughness, it's starting to look like this. But guess what, this is not what it will render. That was a preview. So in order to render, we need to add lights and stuff. So how do you do that? So right now, okay, so the animation is working. This is Eve rendering and this is preview render. So what we're gonna do is check mark screen space resolution, and on the Eve increase the shadow details and cache, cube size and cascade size, so that the shadows look a little bit better. We're gonna use the ambient occlusion and bloom as well. So always make sure to save your Blender file. Right now we're gonna do that. Okay, that's about it. Now what we need to do is go over to the our render view and add a couple of area lights. Here we go. So this is actually what our scene looks like without any light. We don't have any light in this scene. So what we are gonna do is add a 3 area lights on this. One will be on the top, just like this. One will be on both sides too, and we'll have different amount of light, so that it creates a play within between shadow and the object details, so that it starts to look good. So make sure your area lights are pointing straight to your object, one from the back and 2 from the side. So let's do that. I am simply going to copy this area light and just point it towards the object, making sure the size is almost the same. Okay, slowly we're seeing our scene becoming and looking better and better and being complete. Okay, now since we have a 3-point lighting system, we are gonna use the intensity of the light to let's say make the object look even cooler. So we can use different colors to reflect, but in this situation, since the background and the object is very much in high contrast, we don't really need to do that. But I always tell you to experiment with the light and see which works better for you. Okay, now it's time for us to add the camera, and we're gonna add a camera and make sure that it's looking where we're supposed to. So we are not gonna use any depth of field. We can, but we don't really need to at this point. So click on camera to view, and by clicking on this camera window, we can see what the camera is actually seeing. Let's zoom out a little and frame your object accordingly. Make sure your background is perfectly aligned and it doesn't show any transparent part of the background. You can improve the focal length and see how it looks. Yeah, exactly, this is what we are going for. Yeah, we are going to completely fill the frame, since the frame is square and our camera is also doing a square preview. So this will just match it slowly so that it looks good. Okay, so right now we can, as we can see, we needed to increase the light and it made it look a lot better. Okay, so after playing with all the colors a little, what we're gonna do is reduce the background color a little so that it adjusts well. Like I said, play around with the object, and since our animation is done right now, what we need to do is make sure it's outputting the render file perfectly well. So for that purpose we're gonna go into our output and select a folder, and let's say a Blender tutorials for me, and I'm gonna call this a Blender animation 1. So you can name it whatever you want and accept, and in the PNG we're gonna change it to say FFmpeg, or we can use AVI. We can use FFmpeg, and under encoding we can always use other formats as well, but I prefer FFmpeg. So in the encoding you can select the encoding to say completely lossless, and which will be extremely high quality, and encoding speed to slow. So that's it, that's all the settings you need to do for the output. And let's say we output to 24 frames per second is alright, that's fine. So now if we like drag the thing and drag it back, we can see a nice satisfying animation has been made. You have just completed your first satisfying animation easy tutorial on Blender. I hope you'll come back to my channel for more tutorials. And well, in order to complete the animation, just click on render animation, and since we're using Eevee, it will be complete within like a couple of minutes, and you can pretty much post this on your Instagram. So thank you for being here, and I'll see you on the next tutorial. So after it's actually being done, you can see how the preview looks. So I have a VLC output, yeah, MKV output, and this is how it looks. So I hope that was easy, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.